Start.
Do you do it now?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is our second part of our video, and we are on the third question. So how might the patient's gender impact nursing decisions and nursing practice? So first off, I feel like everyone deserves to be looked at and receive the same quality care. However, when it comes to gender, there are physical differences and nurses should be aware of how these genders differ. So for an example, both genders experience heart attacks differently. And so I'll just touch on a few points. So first, women are more likely to suffer from heart attacks at older ages compared to men, and they face different signs and symptoms such as shoulder, neck pain, and nausea. It's also more challenging to tell when a woman has had a heart attack. And one of these challenges is that their waves and traces do not show up on an ECG, which is an electrocardiogram. It also the women and men have different levels of risk involved when it comes to treatment. So women's response to treatment can differ, which requires alternate interventions. So this is just an example of how nurses should uniquely create care plans for individuals and be mindful of their gender.
Great. I touched on a different angle, and that was just about how our own experiences affect how we practice as nurses and our decisions. And that it's really important that we can reflect and understand our own biases and judgments. And we may have different expectations of men or women based on our own biases. So I think that that's really important to consider. And the gender does impact our interventions, even if we don't do it consciously. I feel like it's still an underlying thing that we have to try to recognize in ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree, Carrie. I touched on another angle actually, and it was more just on past trauma, like an abuse that a client may be experiencing. So I think just the nursing practice decisions on getting in deeper into the conversation with their culture and their gender preferences and finding out, because I mean, it could be somebody like a male nurse is helping a client, a female client, but the former abuser or current abuser is a male. So I mean, it might be sensitive. So I think looking into that, being impaired and being aware, as well as the LGBTQ identity, a client may be wanting to seek treatment with someone that's experienced similar experiences, or a non-binary transitional client. So I think just finding out with the nursing chart and finding out exactly, like through therapeutic talk, just what the client would want and prefer for nursing decisions and practice outcomes.
For sure, important to always ask questions, right? If you don't know, ask them.
Yeah,
I agree with all you guys. Holly, I found pretty much the same research as you did, and basically how women have a different, like they display their symptoms and signs differently than men. And so we have to kind of approach their treatment differently. And I think that, as, we become more experienced nurses, we will see that we'll have to give, like, at least consider that, females have a different outcomes than men do. And, I never thought about it ever, like thinking it being part of a nursing practice. Just because I thought you just categorize everybody under the same umbrella, but from doing research, you actually don't, because women display everything, like most things, differently than men. And like we are built differently, we have hormones and we react differently to treatment. And it definitely opened up a lot of just like keeping me open-minded to things now. So when I do go into my nursing practice, I'll have to consider that when I'm approaching my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I definitely feel like obviously genders need to be treated equally, but in those situations, like Tara, like that was a really good point that you brought up, like past trauma, like there could be sensitivities, and some clients might not want to deal with a male nurse or a male doctor just
Yeah.
because of that. So,
Or even
Mhm.
like the males might even be more, there's a reason why they're being aggressive. Like that
mhm,
way of like expressing their frustration, right? Whereas women are more expressive and emotional and we can talk about it. Whereas a guy might be in there just like punching walls and or
Mhm.
punching, this is what I've been doing in the last weeks. Why am I doing this? Well, there's a reason, right? So,
mhm,
you got to
absolutely.
work around that. So
Mhm. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, and it's how might gender affect student outcomes? So I'll just quickly start. I just kind of found some stuff, just kind of going back to one of the previous questions, Monica, you were talking about how like boys are geared up for woodwork, sports, mechanic electives, whereas, girls are typically in arts, food class, and home ec. And I think this type of behavior and just how it's divided can affect student outcomes and just depending on how the learning is brought about in the classroom. So I feel that although there are gender inclusive classrooms, and like obviously today there is gender inclusive classrooms, those types of electives naturally they do have more females or more males. And back, when I went to high school, I do remember being in woodwork class, but I was maybe like there was like maybe 3 or 4 females, whereas all of them were males. And then there was mechanics. I wasn't in that class, but there might have been 1 or 2 girls in that class. So definitely a different learning environment. Um, I also think that in this day and age, like early learning centers, like if males want to role play, characters in movies such as Frozen, like my son is obsessed with Frozen. It's like, you should support it. Teachers should support that, right?
mm,
Same with females, if they want to play with trucks, cars, Avenger figurines, like, they should support that. And, just going into later learning years, teachers should support environments. Boys want to be part of drama class, girls are interested in mechanics. And I think that another great way to support gender inclusive environments is to engage with students in conversations about discriminations, prejudice, stigma. Just discover who these students who they are, allow them to express themselves, allow them to understand that there's no difference between genders, everyone's equal, teach respect, empathy, acceptance, self-esteem. I think that's really important for the earlier development years.
yeah, so I can touch on that with the a different angle. There's the resource handout, Does Learning Come in Pink and Blue? And I just thought there was a couple of really good points in there to do with men are more abstract learners, women are more anxiety about study. Like they're more focused on studying and success with studying. Men are more intuitive, women are more analytical, women are more organized, men are more undirected. So those are kind of some of those things, as well as women tend to attribute success to luck or effort. Men attribute success to ability. So I thought that was really cool to hear. And then I thought that YouTube video was really entertaining, Gender and Learning. And Michael Rice and Lise Elliott had mentioned how the male brain is more spatial, meaning they learn visually and physically, whereas girls tend to learn in an environment that is focused on social and relational skills. So that was kind of interesting as well, just to see how the take on how we adapt in the genders and the environments. And yeah, we're definitely different in learning.
Yeah, Tara, I also found that YouTube video to be really interesting. The one thing that stuck out to me was when I think it was the doctor that was speaking, he had mentioned that boys perceive achievement as unmasculine. And I thought that was like, I just thought that was really interesting because I never really thought that boys would consider, being successful or being academically inclined would be unmasculine.
Yeah.
And then another thing, yeah, they mentioned was the male brain is more spatial, just like you mentioned too. And I didn't know anything about that either.
Yeah.
And I just found it to be really helpful learning that perspective of it, because because boys, I don't know, I just thought that, like, when I grew up, I thought that, boys were always like smarter in math. Like my brother was like really good at math. And then I started learning that, like, girls are actually really good at math too.
Mhm.
But yeah, I thought that video was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that the school system is set up that, like, it doesn't always accommodate different styles of learning as well. It's kind of set up that, like, for instance, my daughter, graduated and did really well in school, but she only ever did mediocre, but she was really praised because she's really sweet and nice, and she put her hand up just enough times in class and engaged, even though she kind of left school and was like, I didn't learn anything. It was like, kind of got praised for just being like a good girl kind of
Wow.
stuff. My son really struggles in school not because he's not smart, it's just it's not set up for the way that his brain operates.
Yeah.
And another thing that I was thinking in this was just in relation to like men in nursing and like why there are so few men in nursing, and like just curious as to, like, we've had men in our program and we don't anymore, and like kind of wondering why that is. Like, is it just a coincidence, or is it harder based on the way that their brain works to learn this way?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, and it just said another point to do with yeah, I'm similar to you, Carrie, with my son as well, the learning environment, and then Natalie, my daughter, just telling me how frustrated her teacher is. It's a female teacher, and I think there is a good group of boys in her class for grade 4 that are like quite loud and obnoxious, and I guess the teacher left them, kept them in school, after school, for like 15 minutes the other day. And it was the whole class, but it was the boys. But it's a consistent thing that's happening, I guess. She said she's constantly like no patience, super frustrated with the boys, makes it known that she's frustrated with the boys and not the girls. So, I mean,
Oh,
yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe that's not something she should be saying. And she's
yeah,
like,
she's giving that message to
she's sending a message that I'm
Yeah.
frustrated with you guys and you boys and not you girls, whereas everyone pays the price. And I'm like, I don't really agree with that, but
Yeah, that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I don't love the education system. I think it has a lot of
oh,
problems in those areas of
yeah,
gender and how kids learn, and those
exactly.
biases against kids that don't learn the same way,
Yeah, for sure.
which definitely affects outcomes for those boys who are then the bad kids,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So I'm just gonna stop the recording.